Think back to a Friday night in 2016. You tapped a button on your phone, a black Toyota Prius magically appeared, and you paid something like $9 to be driven across town. You probably felt like a genius. You probably thought technology had finally made transportation cheap. You were wrong. You were actually accepting a charity handout from a venture capitalist. You see, your ride did not cost $9. It cost closer to $20. You paid $9, and a group of billionaires sitting in boardrooms in Silicon Valley and Tokyo paid the other $11, just so you could get home. They did this for you and millions of other people every single day, for a decade. And they lost billions of dollars doing it. Not a little, a lot, every single year. Why on earth would some of the smartest investors in the world willingly incinerate mountains of cash to subsidize your weekend bar crawls? If you followed the financial news during the 2010s, you probably thought Uber was a massive, embarrassing disaster. And honestly, it is very easy to see why you would think that. For years, financial analysts and journalists laughed at the company. They looked at Uber's balance sheets and pointed out that it was structurally unprofitable. People believed that Uber was just a flawed business model, a house of cards that would eventually collapse the second investors stopped throwing money at it. We all assume that a business exists to make money, so a business that loses money must be failing. But that assumes the goal was to make a profit right away. It was not. Losing money was not a mistake. Losing money was the entire point. It was a highly calculated, aggressive, and frankly, ruthless strategy. To understand how this works, imagine you want to open a lemonade stand in your neighborhood. There is already a kid down the street selling lemonade for $1 a cup. It is a fair price, but he is getting all the foot traffic. So you set up your stand right next to his. But instead of selling your lemonade for $1, you sell it for 20 cents. On top of that, you decide to pay the kid squeezing the lemons $2 an hour, which is double what the other stand pays. You are losing a massive amount of money on every single cup you sell. Any normal business owner would go bankrupt by Tuesday. But you have a secret weapon. You have a rich uncle who stands behind you with a briefcase full of $100 bills, and every time you lose money, he just hands you more cash. What happens next? Everyone buys your 25-cent lemonade. The kid squeezing lemons for the other stand quits and comes to work for you. The other lemonade stand goes out of business entirely because he simply cannot compete with your artificial prices. And the exact minute your competitor packs up his table and goes home forever, you look at your loyal customers, you cross out the 25-cent sign, and you write $5. That is exactly what Uber did to the global taxi industry. This strategy has a name in the startup world. It is called blitz scaling. The idea is to prioritize speed over efficiency, using huge piles of capital to achieve a monopoly before anyone else can even figure out what is happening. And Uber executed this on a scale that human history had literally never seen before. Let us look at the actual numbers, because they are staggering. Between 2014 and the beginning of 2023, Uber managed to lose a jaw-dropping $31.5 billion. Let that sink in. $31.5 billion evaporated. In the year 2018 alone, Uber spent $5.6 billion just on what they called cost of revenue. A massive chunk of that was categorized as excess driver incentives. That is corporate speak for paying drivers more money than the rider actually paid for the trip. A financial analysis in 2016 revealed that, on average, Uber passengers were only paying 41% of the actual cost of their rides. Investors were quietly paying the other 59%. Uber was using billions of dollars from funds like Japan's SoftBank Vision Fund to artificially inflate driver wages so that anyone with a steering wheel would sign up, while simultaneously artificially suppressing rider fares so that no consumer would ever dream of calling a traditional yellow cab again. They aggressively crushed local competitors, bleeding them dry in price wars from the United States to Europe. And it worked. They starved the traditional taxi industry of both drivers and passengers. Then the trap snapped shut. Once the competition was cleared out and the company had established a near monopoly in ride-hailing and food delivery, Uber flipped the switch. They started cutting driver incentives. They started raising prices for you, the rider. If you have taken an Uber lately, you know exactly what I am talking about. That $9 ride from 2016 is now $28. And suddenly, the company that everyone laughed at for losing money is not losing money anymore. In February 2024, Uber announced its first ever annual operating profit as a public company. They made $1.1 billion in 2023. Then they made even more the next year. By the end of 2025, they were generating nearly $3 billion in free cash flow in a single quarter. But here is the absolute craziest part of this entire plan. Those $31 billion in losses, they did not just vanish. They turned into a massive hidden financial superpower. Because of the way tax laws work, a company can use its past losses to offset its future profits. This is called a net operating loss carryforward. By the end of 2022, Uber had racked up over $30 billion in accumulated deficits. This means that as Uber rakes in billions of dollars in profits today and over the next several years, they can use those massive historical losses to shield their new income from taxes. They essentially prepaid their tax bill by losing investor money for a decade. It is financially brilliant. But here is where it gets complicated. You cannot just replicate this strategy today. This entire master plan only worked because of a very specific, weird moment in economic history. The 2010s were the era of zero interest rate policy. Borrowing money was essentially free, which meant investors were desperate for high-growth tech startups and were willing to fund endless losses. That era is completely over. Money is expensive now. If you tried to pitch an investor today on losing $30 billion over 10 years to maybe build a monopoly, they would laugh you out of the room. Furthermore, the reality of flipping the switch has left everyone completely miserable. Riders are furious because a 10-minute trip costs as much as a nice dinner. Drivers are constantly protesting because Uber takes a larger cut of the fare than ever before, sometimes up to 40% or more, leaving them struggling to make minimum wage after paying for their own gas and car maintenance. The math finally works for Wall Street, but it feels deeply broken for the people actually using the app. Uber did not actually invent a radically better way to get from point A to point B. They just invented a way to weaponize a mountain of investor cash to buy an entire industry, starve it out, and then charge us all for the privilege of never having another choice.